Welcome everybody to the Decipher podcast. What's going on? Thank you so much, guys, for your love and support. I appreciate you all. I appreciate you. I appreciate how y'all showed up, how you showed out, how you shared the link, how you commented, how you subscribed, how you shared with your friends, how you provided feedback. All of it was appreciated, much appreciated. I feel loved knowing that you guys actually liked what I put out there. And fun fact, that podcast introduction was recorded in October. Believe it or not. October of 2020, I recorded that episode and I hated it. I hated my voice. I hated the audio. I hated all of it. But I decided to step out on March 1st in the evening. I was laying in bed. I went to open up a document thinking, I'm just going to be doing one thing, and then found the audio, started seeing all the stuff that I was working on, seeing the logo, seeing the brand kit, seeing all these different things. And I was just like, you have all the tools right in front of you to just put it out there and see how the world takes it. And thankfully, you guys at least saw the vision. And I appreciate it a lot. So why am I here today on the second episode? I thought about the title of this hard, and I kind of laughed because I put it out there. Once I knew what the podcast title would be, I did put out there for people to guess, and I cracked up a lot because I didn't expect. Not that I didn't expect. A lot of them, which is very few, how these, YouTubers and bloggers and vloggers do. Many of you asked. No, sis, not many. 3. It's just 3, sis. It's okay. It's just 3. Many of you, a few of you guys took a chance and guessed what the title of the podcast would be. And I cracked up. Some of it is just ridiculous and they know it. You know who you are out there that commented those. Y'all have me cracking up. From stripper to hot girl to heathen. Y'all are real ones. Y'all think y'all cute, but y'all are real ones. Cause they're my real friends. And my friends are crazy. Anyways. And the other one was Confessions of a Former Tomboy, which I completely understood. And I actually was flattered because I'm a forever tomboy and I don't think that's going to change. But I recognize that guessing that means that there is some growth. Like you guys are seeing a little femininity out of your girl. And I appreciate that because I'm really a tomboy at heart. The title of this podcast, like you don't see it already, is Confessions of a Former People Pleaser. A couple of years ago, if someone was to say to me, Desiree, all you do is people please, I would have got offended. I would have been defensive. I would have said it with my whole heart and chest. How? I ain't no people pleaser. I do. I march to my own drum and all this other fugazi. Remember that word, fugazi? Fugazi stuff that I would have tried to portray. But the reality is that I once and still struggle with being a people pleaser. And through this podcast, I'm going to share with you guys a little bit into how I got there. A lot of my people pleasing that I can remember comes from being a little girl and wanting to create friendships. I grew up in a Pentecostal West Indian home. That's a doozy in itself. I could end the podcast there. Please add your comments if you know what kind of just put in your comments there, right at that moment. We could just hang this all up. That's a mouthful right there. If you know, you know. Anyways, growing up in a West Indian Pentecostal household, one, West Indian people are big on children being children and children being seen and not heard. And I don't mean that I wasn't allowed to be a child and have fun and be silly and goofy, but at the same time, there is a high level and expectation of respect, especially when it comes to your elders. I was always known as a very respectful child. I don't think there is one adult or elder that knows me or have known me as a child that would say I was ever disrespectful. I was always the respectful one. I was always the well-behaved one. Nobody had any issues or problems with me. Period. I also knew very much so that my behavior and my expectations around my behavior was seen as a direct reflection of your parents. If you cut up and carried on, the idea was there was something wrong with home and the parenting style. People tend to judge that way. Also, because of growing up in a Pentecostal doctrine, I was already an oddball by the time I became school age. I didn't have my ears pierced. I wore skirts. I did not wear pants. I didn't wear jewelry. I didn't have my ears pierced. I think I said that already. You could tell that part was tough. I always wanted my ears pierced. I think that was the one that was just like, oh, come on. At least my ears pierced. No nail polished, anything like that. So slowly as the years gone by, school age wise, from not so much kindergarten, but like first, second, third grade, it started becoming very clear that I was different from the bunch. And because I was different, kids will be kids, and they started pointing it out. And, they didn't quite understand why I was different, and I really did not know how to articulate why I was different. I just knew that I was, and they knew that it was weird, at least to them. Going through that put me in a very deep sense of isolation at times, because I didn't know how to describe myself. I didn't know how to describe the doctrine. I didn't know how to express or explain why I was different from them. I just knew that I was sad by it. Now, don't get me wrong. There were friendships that were made, but even in those friendships, meaning, classroom friendships, it was always evident to me that I was different. And because of that, I always felt I needed, in order to create friendships, that I must put out extra effort because it will not come very naturally to me. I noticed as a child what I would do is always try my hardest, my very hardest, to assimilate. I would try to, imitate just whatever vibe that was around. So if the girls were dancing and singing and, doing things, I would join in, or at least try to appear as if I am just like them. And it would work for a while, but then of course somebody would say something that would put me back in my box, and my feelings would be hurt. Moving forward into my preteen, teenage years, so middle school into high school, I was able to kind of, I don't want to say finesse my parents, because I also think that they were in a place where they were kind of letting up on some of the doctrines that they grew up in and kind of was having a sense of compromise when it came to it. But I also was one of those people or one of them children that could really keep nagging about something and I'll find my way around it. I'm talented in that way till this day. It was hard for me to do sports like things because I had a skirt on. So in elementary school, I spent a lot of time sitting on the bench during gym because I had a skirt on, and it was seen as inappropriate because, you'll be able to see up my skirt or whatever the case may be. So I sat a lot of times out. And when I got to middle school, it was very clear that this would be some form of hindrance that I don't think my parents could overlook. So they came to some agreement to allow me to wear, athleisure wear for specifically gym. But you take an inch, you get an inch, you take a mile. So I started wearing them outside of gym until I end up being able to finally finesse and start wearing jeans. And then I started to fit in, and then I started to look like everyone else. And slowly but surely, I was able to kind of look like everyone around me. By the time I got to high school, I still struggled with my identity, and it showed up a lot in the way that friendships worked for me. I still had this idea in my head that I needed to assimilate with those that are around me. So what I would do is create this person who I want to be in order to maintain friendships or to gain friendships. So the person that was being presented to people at that time was not the real Desiree. It was the Desiree that was curated because she felt like that was the only way to create friendships. So I became a follower. I did what everybody wanted me to do. I was a giver. I gave everything that I had. If I had $10 and you said, "Oh, I don't got no money," you was getting $5. Sometimes you would even get more, because in my head, oh, you know what? If I had $10 and I gave her 6 or 7, oh, she's really going to be my friend because she sees how much I sacrificed and gave her more. So she's going to keep me around because I'm a really good friend. I would always show up, always be present, always have, people's backs. I was very much so go with the flow, even if I didn't want to do something within reason. Let me say that, within reason. But there's a lot of times where I didn't want to do something, but I did it anyways because I knew that if I did, the friendships would remain intact. The issue with that, as probably some of y'all know where this is going, is that it doesn't last very long. Because at some point you get uncomfortable, and there comes a point in time where you have to say no, or I can't, or I'm uncomfortable. And any time that you present yourself as just this people-pleasing person that just goes with the flow and says yes to anything, when you finally say no, now you're showing up differently than how people perceive you. And because of that reason, people tend to get upset or distance themselves. And that was painful to me because all I kept thinking was, well, I did everything that everybody wanted me to. I showed up. I was there. I gave what I had. I gave my all. I thought I was kind. I thought I was nice. I thought I was considerate. I thought I was all these things. And still, I end up being alone. And it caused a great deal of isolation on my part. So badly that when I end up leaving high school and entering into college, I created this persona of not liking people. And I can honestly say, looking back, it wasn't that I didn't like people. It was me putting up another persona because I did not want to be hurt. So in my head, it was better not to create friendships. It was better to stick to yourself or have a very few and far between friendships, because if I operate that way, then no one can hurt me. But something beautiful did happen. Even in that level of isolation, one after the other, I met people that actually accepted me for who I was. And I was able to flourish in who Desiree really is. It was still odd for me, through college, that people actually liked me. And I didn't have to do anything for it. And even in getting a glimpse of that, I still had this deep-rooted feeling that I needed to still people please, despite all of that. And it's something that I carried into my adulthood. I recognize it, especially when I moved back to Boston. I went to school in Providence, Rhode Island. So I stayed out there for a few years before I came back to Boston. And felt like, I was missing out on a lot of friendships because, people were moving back to their respective cities, towns, states. And I was coming back to Boston years after I graduated college and feeling that sense of isolation yet again. So outside of work, I didn't really have many friendships unless they were people that I went to college with that happened to be in the same town. But we were all busy. We were trying to start our careers. When you get that student loan notification, baby, it changes your whole life. When Nelnet, who else? Sally Mae and all her evil stepsisters come out, it changes the game. It changes the game. So we were all busy. Everybody's just trying to, move on with life. And I definitely felt like, what, Desiree, like you showed up in the world authentically and it was received well and you could do it again. But there's a part of me that still felt uncomfortable being my true self. And it played out significantly in a lot of the interactions that I had with people. And I recognize it and I take ownership of it. There was still a part of me that felt like I couldn't fully be my true self. And I recognize now that a lot of people really didn't get to see who the real Desiree was. All they saw was the representative, the person that I created and put out there. So I take full ownership of that. I also think because of that reason and because of therapy and working through those things and dealing with levels of vulnerability that I struggled with, I recognize that now at 37 years old, this is going to still be something that is shocking to many. And when they realize that the person that I put out there as the representative of Desiree is not the true Desiree, it is going to create some kind of hurt and pain. It will create a divide. It will create a distance. It will create the end of friendships. And I take full responsibility of it. I also would be lying if I would carry out this podcast to say, well, I was coming from a place of hurt. Actually, that wouldn't be a lie. There is part of that, right? But the reality is when people try to please others, it's also a form of manipulation. Because at the end of the day, and that's something that I had to own up to and really forgive myself for, it is your ego that is saying that people have to like you. And if you perform a certain way, people have no choice but to be your friend. And the reality is, no one has to like you. And no one has to give you a reason why they don't like you. And that's something that I had to sit with and learn and cope with. It doesn't matter what you do for people. People have a choice whether or not they want you in their lives or they don't. And it can be for any reason. Is it fair? No. Are you going to understand it all the time? No. Is it painful? Yes. Do you have to do some kind of self-healing around it? Absolutely. The other part of it is no one likes a people pleaser. And despite my attempts of being a people pleaser, I'm pretty sure people saw that mess from a mile away. Even if they didn't quite know how to put their finger on it, they recognized it from a mile away and they probably thought it was weird. No one likes a people pleaser. They tolerate a people pleaser. They might even allow you to be in their world because you serve a purpose for the moment, for the season in their life. But at the end of the day, they really don't like people pleasers. Nobody does. And that's my humble, honest opinion that I am working through. People have the right to determine whether or not they want you in their lives, and they don't have to give you an explanation. And it's painful, but you will live. And because they made that choice, and this is something that I had to learn, doesn't make you a bad person, and you don't have to beat yourself up about it. And I used to beat myself up about it hard body. You hear me? I always say, and it's a sad thing, and I'm a lot better in it, but the reason why I was able to deal with a lot of disrespect and a lot of mean and hurtful things thrown my way out of people's mouths is because it could never top the way that I would talk down to myself. So you couldn't beat me. You couldn't match me to it. You couldn't. Absolutely not. And that's something that I had to work through. People make choices and it's okay. I'm not saying it's always fair, but it does not diminish who you are. And even if you do something that you identify with being wrong to hurt someone, you have to go back and do the work to either forgive yourself or to ask for forgiveness. But either way, you learn, you grow, and you move on. As long as you don't stay stuck, there is another day to do better. Now, with that being said, let me just give y'all a quick little quote, because when you got friends in high places, you can count on them to, provide you some feedback. And I have a sister who is a licensed therapist. So I'm going to quote Dr. Carter because I asked her to provide me with a definition, her definition of what a people pleaser is. What she provided me is a people pleaser: living and acting out of agency to gain acceptance and validation from others when it should innately be possessed in oneself. And I agree. I think a lot of my issue was that I refused to do the work and realized that it was beyond just me wanting to create friendships. There was a part of me that really lacked a lot of self-esteem. And I felt like having friends would validate me and make me feel like I'm worthy. So, with that being said, I'm going to end it here. I don't want to get too deep, but I wanted to share this because I wanted to see if anybody else can identify with this. Maybe you don't. Maybe you had this already understood as far as knowing your self-worth and knowing how to move in this world without having to please others. And if you are that person, I applaud you. That's amazing. But I know that there's people out there that can kind of recognize this behavior or this pattern, right? I also found it interesting talking to my friend, Dr. Carter. I'm always going to say Dr. Carter. But we had a conversation last weekend, and one of the things we discussed is that, you could be a people pleaser and be pretty assertive and pretty self-aware in other areas of your life. So you can be a people pleaser in your family, then to your friends, you are very assertive and self-aware. Or you could be assertive and aware of yourself when it comes to your family and your friends, but at work, you present as a people pleaser. So there's many levels to this, and I just wanted to create some dialogue around it. And I wanted to see what you guys thought about this particular topic. So yes, Desiree is still a work in progress, but I claim to be a former people pleaser. I am still doing the work. At times, I catch myself operating in that space, but I give myself the grace to identify it when it happens and correct it as best as I can. And also allow myself to feel all the feels and try again the next day or try again in that same moment. Hold myself accountable, but give myself credit that I am indeed doing the work. And I hope that you guys are also giving yourselves credit because this life is not easy and we are all constantly evolving and growing through many areas of our lives. So again, thank you for listening. I appreciate all the love and support. I am going to be posting soon email list that I would love for you to sign up so you can be notified for the next episode when it drops live. Thank you for listening. And until next time, thank you for listening to the Decipher podcast. I appreciate you all.